The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, we are live now.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we will try to give you some more background on a very interesting project, a fiber rollout project, focused on what Proximus in Belgium is trying to do, with the intention to cover more than 2 million homes with a fiber to the home connection within the coming years. And we'll dive into some real life experiences and practical lessons learned on the innovative and automated planning and design process. I'm very honored to have with me here very distinctive speakers. So Geert Bruiland, he's domain manager and part of the fiber network program at Proximus. He will guide us through a lot of the practical aspects and the daily things that are happening within Proximus on this side. And Patrick Delcoigne, the Director of Network Engineering and Operations at Proximus, will give us some more insights in the early stage of the webinar on the whole Proximus project and strategy. I myself, I'm Raf Meersman, I'm the CEO of Comsoft, and I'm also joined by my colleague, Kelly Fournier, our Head of Client Acquisition. So we hope we will be able to give you some interesting content in the next hour or so. We foresee about 45 minutes for the presentation part, and we'll treat Q&A at the end. As usual, I guess most of you are familiar with the webinar formats. You can leave your questions in the platform, and we'll pick up some of those questions as time permits towards the end of the session. You also see on this first slide that there is a QR code with also a URL. So this will be used throughout the webinar for an online polling, a live polling system. So we invite you to scan the QR code or go to that URL and leave that page open because it will automatically refresh with new questions as we go along. With that, let's have a first test of the polling system. So normally, if you go to the URL, you should see an option to leave or to select the type of company that you are part of, whether it's a network operator, consulting firm, etc. And we indeed see answers coming in as we go. So that is already very nice. That seems to work very well, and you are finding your way. So feel free to keep on adding. It's a very nice spread. So that is also interesting to know. And you can keep on adding your responses now, but you also automatically will see new questions popping up there as we go. Now with that, I would like to hand over to Patrick Delcoigne for an introduction on the Proximus project. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Raf, for the introduction. So good afternoon, everybody. So I'm very honored today to introduce you our company, Proximus. It is FTTH Council webinar. Proximus is the Belgian telecommunication operator. So we are operating both in Belgium, but also on the international scene via our daughter company, BICS. And we are a leading provider on the fixed and mobile networks, so as well as in the ICT services. Basically, our strategy relies on 4 pillars. The first one all starts with solid foundations. I name this is the networks. And our mission is to build the best gigabit network for Belgium in both fixed and mobile. Secondly, we want to operate as a digital native company. What does it mean? It means to have a digital interaction with our customer, but also starting using digital tools also in the network production environment. And in that respect, you will see that Comsof is bringing a high degree of automation. Thirdly, we want to grow profitably, and this we do with partnership. You will see this also in the fiber deployment, and we do this for co-development and co-investment. Finally, we want to play a really important societal role by bringing sustainable solutions, green solution, and also by caring for the digital inclusion. That's basically the 4 pillars of the Proximus strategy. Now, if I have the control. Okay, let's start with the first pillar, which is basically about the networks. Okay. Yeah. When looking on this first pillar, which is building the best gigabit networks for Belgium, our approach is threefold, I would say. First, we want to offer any service on both mobile and fixed network. You do see the variety, triple play, but also the IoT and so on. Secondly, and it's special for an operator, that's create as from the start a really open network, open API, which is by design scalable to our retail customer, residential and professional, but also all the other licensed operator, the OLOs, and the virtual mobile network operators, as well as industrial partners like the institution or European Commission, airport, and so on. So we want also to create not the network, but the best network in fixed and mobile, the truly best network in capacity, in symmetricity, in latency, in quality, and in resilience. So that's basically what we are building as foundations. Okay, let's start now with the fiber. That will be our focus today. So fiber for Belgium. Where are we today in Belgium? A few words first about Belgium. Belgium is a small country, 30,000 square kilometer, 11 million inhabitants, which represent in fact 6 million homes and business. That's a quite challenging environment, I would say, on an urbanistic point of view. You do see the diversity. I would even say the complexity that we have to address. That's not a usual country. That's quite complex, to be honest. We deploy the fiber both in wall-mounted, so on the facade, as we say, and underground. And this we do with partners. We'll see this afterwards. The end goal is to really switch off the copper after the deployment. So on a relatively short time frame, we want to really switch off the copper in every fiber zone. Yeah. Now, if we look at the status today, so Belgium today is not known as the FTTH country, not yet, I would say. Belgium currently ranks nearly among the last in the European countries. We have about 10% of national coverage in FTTH today. But we have decided to accelerate the plan and to move massively. Belgium, as you have seen maybe in the last FTTH Council report, is really now the fastest growing market in Europe. We did times 1.5 on 1 year in terms of deployments. And we intend to cover 70% of the population by 2028. It means 4.2 million homes passed. This concretely means that every year we intend to cover 10% of the country every year. It represents about 6 billion euro investment over the years to come. And looking now at the graph that you do see here, that's about yearly volumes, as you see. And those yearly volumes, you see a doubling of the deployment pace year over year since 2017. So we double, and we will reach and we will culminate above 600,000 homes passed a year, meaning 10% of the country, or one house every 15 seconds. We are fully on track with the plan. That's massive, that's exponential, I would even say, and that we will do on 2 ways. First, by deploying ourselves or our own assets. That's 2.2 million homes passed that we want to deploy, that we will deploy. And that's an additional 2 million homes passed that we will do with partners, with a joint venture that we have created. Fiberklaar on the north, and there is a second joint venture on the south part. So in total, 4.2 million homes passed, representing at least 70% of the country. And this we want to do for all the players. That's an open network. We have today already more than 30 wholesale deals and some still incubating. Now let's look at what we need to do this. But typically, to build this network, we really need a very old machinery. And this both in field production, trenching, splicer, blowing, and so on, but also in design activities. And for the design activities, we have chosen to work with Comsoft. Comsoft with its powerful design engine. Comsoft is basically, I would say, a Belgian company created from a spin-off of the University of Ghent. And Proximus and Comsoft are cooperating since many years already. We have chosen the Comsof Fiber products to design the fiber networks in an automated way, in a quite complex environment, you will see. But not only that's automated, which is important to keep the pace, but that's automate, and the design that is out of the system is made in such a way that we really have the most cost-optimal design by reusing existing infrastructure and optimizing everything. We do use this for the FTTH brownfield mainly since 3 years now, but we also complement the application, I would say, of the Comsof Fiber product in a greenfield environment in other fiber diversity. So that's now rough. That will be maybe explain better than I do the history of Comsoft and where you are positioned on these markets.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick, for your kind introduction also of the Proximus project, but also of Comsoft indeed. Just indeed a few words for those people who may not know Comsoft as well. We are actually a company that's been around for 23 years now. And since the start, we've always been focused on developing software for network planning of telecom networks. And then more specifically, since 2004, with a strong focus on the fiber to the home networks. So we have a long history in this and have also been very active in this market. We are with more than 50 employees spread over 2 offices, Ghent and Toronto. And we have been involved in, and I'm very proud to say, in more than 200 fiber projects across more than 50 countries worldwide, making us quite experienced in the different flavors of fiber rollout projects. Important to note is that we are a software company, so we develop and we implement and deliver the software at our clients. But it doesn't mean some people prefer design of networks as a service. For that, we have a growing network of certified design partners who can use our software to also deliver that as a service. Now, what is our software about? You could look at it basically as a kind of calculation machine or calculation engine that will automate a lot of decision making in how your network could be constructed. But to feed it, you need to put in a lot of data. We'll talk about a bit more for the specific Proximus case, but it's a lot of GIS-based data, roads, buildings, etc. And you also need to specify your design rules and your unit prices. And with all that input, and you can obviously also tune that input, the software will suggest to you an optimal network in a highly automated way. But it's not just the topology and the map. It's also a whole database full of every little number that you can think of. And of course, based on those detailed numbers, you can create all kinds of summary views that give you a lot of insights on the costs of deploying the fiber network. Now, Kelly, you talk regularly to a lot of our clients and involved in these activities. Maybe you can explain a little bit how they see the value of our software.
Yeah, indeed. We of course, as you would expect, we talk regularly to our clients and try to get information from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And it's really what they tell us is the combination of the power of automation to optimize the designs to eventually find a constructible design, right? Because we all know here that it's not necessarily the cheapest design that will be buildable in the field. So you don't necessarily only look at the cheapest way to design an area, but you have to build it, design it, I should say, in a way that's going to be doable in the field, right? So our clients really tell us it's about speed. So they constantly come with different time savings of whether it's half the time or 90% speed gains in their end-to-end process. There's about a 5 to 10% cost effectiveness gain in the build. So not only in design costs, but it's very important to mention that these savings are in the construction phase, and we know that a 5 and 10% is considerable cost. It really brings value, especially in the quality and uniformity of the designs. And lastly, one important point is the cost control, so limiting the variations between estimated costs in the planning phase and design phase and the as-built costs, so the actual field costs. So that's a big win. So yeah, having said that, maybe we can look at more information from our attendees And going to another poll question, we'd like to know which of these statements best describe your current FTTX planning and design context. Now, more than one answer applies, so I would encourage you to choose all the answers that would apply to you. So either you do manual planning and design today, maybe you already use an automation software. Maybe you're simply interested to find out more about automation. Maybe you're not convinced, of course, that is also possible. And many of you could simply not be involved yet in planning and design activities, but which may come with time. Interesting distribution. We can see that there is interest in automation. Manual design, planning and design, always surprising to me that in 2021 we're still doing this, but of course we see this regularly as well. Well, hopefully with these answers, we'll see you'll get some answers and more clarity on the presentation. I think now without further ado, I can bring in Geert to present the Proximus case and show how the use of Comsoft benefited the Proximus. So Geert, up to you now.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I'm indeed going to walk you through what I would call a basic setup of Comsoft at Proximus, how we at Proximus are using Comsoft. It is within my team that we are using Comsoft, and already since a couple of years, and I'm going to show you how we are doing this. Okay, I'm going to start with basically the same slide as Raf was showing it, but more specifically a bit tuned to what we are doing in Proximus, because hey, indeed, as Raf was saying, you need a lot of data. Okay? You have the Comsoft calculator that will calculate the design for you, but you need a lot of input data. And you need also a defined region. Right? You cannot just do that randomly. You need to have a region where you want to calculate your design in. We call those regions typically fiber hoods. That's Proximus terminology. And a fiber hood is on average 3,000 living units. With respect to the data, we are using all kinds of data, in fact, and we are using off-the-shelf data that we have in-house in Proximus, or that we can obtain from the government, for instance, cartography data. We have also in-house processed data, so we calculate some of our data as well. And we also use survey data that is gathered by our partners who are doing the construction and who do, for instance, a street survey. So we have a lot of data coming in. We have, of course, also the design rules and the unit prices. Those are typically defined by Proximus, so we have our own design rules, and of course also our own unit prices. And that all goes in the mix in the Comsoft calculator. And we typically do, and that's perhaps also very typical for Proximus, it just is not one calculation that we are doing for a given fiber route. No, we are doing different iterations. And we will go deeper into detail with respect to that, how we are doing that. It's just not one calculation, but different iterations. And what comes out of it are designs, plans, a network, and data. And also what we are doing with that is we store it centrally. We try to consolidate all data. And that is very interesting also to drive other processes. And I'll come back later in the presentation as well on how we do that. But first of all, the Comsoft process at Proximus. I was talking about doing designs on the level of fiber route, on average 3,000 living units. That is what I would call the designs, what you can see more on the right of the screens, the designs, the high-level designs, HLD. But the story starts even way before that, and that's what I called here on the slide first run, a national run. And that's basically the first calculation, or a very big calculation that we are doing in order to obtain figures, to have figures on the level of a business case. What is also very interesting to mention is that there is a strict part that Proximus is doing. So Proximus is really in charge of using Comsof and designing the fiber network. And at a certain point after the high-level design is done, it is handed over to the construction partner. And so Proximus is in charge of how the design will look, and we are actually doing the design as well. The construction partner is afterwards responsible for the construction of it. But first, look, perhaps first take a look at what is the first run. What is it? What do we do with it? And basically, I think in a lot of companies, it starts with the questioning, because you just don't do fiber deployment like that. It's not that you say on a certain day, well, okay, let's do fiber deployment. No, you want to build a case. You want to build a fiber case.
Yeah, and here I think it's worth mentioning indeed that when confronted with this question, what we often see is there's a great dilemma at this stage between the accuracy that you need on the numbers and the speed, the time you get to produce those numbers. And often, yeah, it used to be that you needed to make a choice driven by a limitation in time. How accurate can you get those numbers? But nevertheless, when you look at the numbers Patrick was also mentioning on what amount of money you're putting in, you don't want to get those numbers wrong, right? I think you'll agree with me that you want to be certain about it. So yeah, tell us a bit how you actually do that to get that right balance between those two.
Well, basically, I think we started also very long ago with a very high-level business case, but we saw as well what Comsoft could do, and the level of accuracy it could bring. And of course, as soon as the finance guys figure out that you can provide very detailed figures, they want those figures. And then it's a question of speed. And indeed, we worked very hard the last years to have those figures more and more easily and more faster. But what's very important, I think, is the accuracy. Because, and that's the system that we worked on. Is that we developed, if I can get to the next slide. Yeah. Because the question is, for a business case, where you're going to, when and where are you going to start your deployment? We have 6 million homes in Belgium. Where are the juicy bits, and how are you going to calculate that? And basically what we are doing is that we said, okay, we know the Comsof software, and we use the Comsof software on a level of fiber routes. That's something that we know. But do that same thing, but do that now 600 times. Divide the country in 600 times, and that's basically what we are doing. And do 600 times what we call a Comsof run. And we choose to do that on a level because with the copper, we already divided Belgium in more or less 600 local networks. And we basically are running a Comsof run per local network. We collect all that data, and we consolidate all that data. And out of it, we have a huge number of figures and numbers. But that is very valuable. Right? There we can get a very clear idea on what it would cost to deploy a fiber network in the whole of Belgium. Input data the quality of the input data there is very important. I think we are more or less lucky in Belgium that we have rather good quality of input data, and with that I mean the cartography, and with respect to the addresses, the number of what we call the demand points. But nevertheless, we see differences between regions. We have to take that into account. When you're doing this kind of exercise, you just don't want to do that on your laptop. You need a server environment, and that's something that we learned as well. You need a server environment. You need software that will support doing that, loading and unloading of data, combining data, processing results. And even then it will, you don't have it on one day. It takes a couple of weeks to calculate, and it takes a couple of weeks to process all the data. But it's well worth the effort, to be quite honest. Because what we further do with this data is that, okay, we take this data further. It's not just like we have network cost data, because for every little square or whatever polygon there in Belgium, we have a network cost. We mix it with marketing data with the same granularity, number of customers, number of potential customers, number of potential revenue, whatever. And by combining that, you can find the juicy bits, you can find the low-hanging fruit. And that's basically why we are doing the national run. And we call it a national run, the first run. And in fact, it's something that we will repeat. It's not something that we have done once to have a business case, but it's a process that we repeat in order to always have the latest data. But it's highly valuable.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but something comes to mind. I've been involved in the past in national runs and national business cases, and there has been pains there, especially in government subsidized programs. But even though gaps with these national runs from a technical level, combining technical and business case, and then the decision-making process of the executives, whether it's C-level or higher. Did this bring any value? And if you can maybe talk about how this positively influenced or not decision-making process at executive level of Proximus?
Well, I can answer very simply on that. And the fact is that the national run, or simply the name, the national run, is very widely known within the company, within Proximus, and even at higher management. They know about Comsof and they know about the national run and about the value that it brings. So in that sense, it's not just a little exercise that we are doing in a corner, but it's very, very well known within the company on all levels, I would say. Okay, so that's the first bit. That's in fact where everything started with a big calculation, and where we're getting the figures to do our deployment, our fiber deployment, and that we know where to start. But how are we doing this now on a day-to-day basis? Because that's the second part, the high-level designs, the HLDs, that we do in order to construct our fiber network. And basically, I already talked about that we are doing this in different iterations. We are going over a fiberhood, and we are going to calculate a fiberhood different times. We are calculating feeding and distribution. So not only distribution, but also the feeding. We are using different layers of input, demand points, existing infrastructure, wall mount, trenching, cartography. And by doing different iterations, you can increase your accuracy and the quality of your design. And at the same time, and we will see that directly, you will get a view on how it is changing, how your design is getting better. First step, this step is a very important one. It's cleaning of the input data. Because even if your input data is okay, to say, it has a certain quality, input, and the cleaning of the input data is very important, because even a small error can have a significant effect on the outcome of your design. So it's important to have good input data. is the first part we start with in-house data. The second part, what we call here the 2A, we integrate street survey data. So that's data that has been gathered by the partner, with the construction partner, of actual street addresses, updated information. We do a Comsoft run. And then I think that's also very important. One of the iterations that we are doing is in involving the construction partner. It's just not that we are doing, again, our design in a little corner. I think it's also important to involve the construction partner in this process. So between what we call stage 2A and 2B, we ask the construction partner to give his feedback on the design that we have made. And he can give some points to consider or to change. And in the last iteration, we can even integrate site survey data to have the most accurate and qualitative design. And that's, in fact, that's the thing that we want to do, have a very high quality design. And the best thing I think we can do that is doing that in different iterations. Main takeaways from me, what I've learned here for us is that, again, I've said it, cleaning data is very important. It takes time. And in fact, it takes the most time in this process here, because just doing the Comsoft run, letting the machine do the calculation, doesn't take that a long time. Cleaning data takes time, but it is needed. The better your data is, the better your result. Garbage in, garbage out. So the opposite is also true. Very good input, very good output. And I think it's also very important here that we involve the construction part in this process, that he can take part in the design process, that it doesn't, the design at the end, at the 2C design, it's all of a sudden a design that we say to the construction partner, and now you have to construct this. Now I think it's important that he can also have his say in this process, and that he can see how the design evolves as well. So that way he is prepared as well.
Yes, yes. And well, I would like to add just here that for sure, this is not a specific Proximus problem. The quality of data, it's the same in every country. It is indeed sometimes a barrier you need to overcome when you want to introduce the automation in the process, and therefore can sometimes be like, okay, should we invest time in this? But as you rightfully say here, there's so much things you gain afterwards from taking that step that it's crucial. And what I also have seen over the past, I would say 5, 6, 7 years, is that there is also an important general improvement, evolution in the general quality of data. Patrick talked in the beginning about digital native company objective. Well, if you look at the quality of the own records of a company like Proximus, there is a continuous improvement that really also contributes to the process in a lot of ways. And even new things like LiDAR data, where just driving a van automatically recognizing the street survey or the existence of a street pole that could be reused for aerial cable is things we've seen at certain customers that can actually be used to further automate also the cleaning of the data. So I think it's a challenge, but an investment worth taking. And that will definitely increase the efficiency in the end-to-end process.
Yeah, indeed, and it depends a lot of what is your basic data quality, and you can indeed enhance it with other things like LiDAR and others. But I think in the Belgian case that we have quite a good basic quality to start off with, but that's also an advantage, even if there are differences per region, and that's something that we see as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, we do.
I have a question. Yeah, I'm doing this design with my team, we call, by the way, the Comsof team. So that's product placement, I guess. But And yeah, we've done more last year, more than 1 million homes calculated in different iterations, of course, but less than 5. Must be kidding. How many people, how many designers and quality assurance resources do we need to do that? What do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because, like you guys said, it's very effort driven now, whether it's cleaning up of the data, the input data, or whether you need to go and collect some data and actually do the designs after that. So yeah, different choices could be more than 30, between 21 and 30, could be all the way less than 5. So it's interesting to see. A good distribution, we see that maybe a majority combined is somewhere between 11 and 30 here for the number of resources. So we'd be curious to see what was the case with Proximus, and if we're talking, you know, the national run already, we're talking 6 million, not just 1 million, but maybe we get more information on that.
Yeah, we're talking about here the daily operations, what we are doing with my team that using Comsof and how we are doing. I didn't vote because, yeah, I know the answer, of course. It wouldn't be very honest to do so. I have a small team of 4 who are doing this. And even to be quite honest, not all 4 of them are doing full-time designs with Comsoft. Because yeah, we are also working on automating certain stuff, and we are working also on design rules, etc. But with less than 4, we calculated more than 1 million living units last year. In different iterations. It doesn't mean that we have already calculated 1/6 of Belgium. But what is more is that it's a very crucial step in the fiber deployment, because every design, that's why I mentioned also that, like, there is no pressure on my team, but every design of the brownfield fiber deployment is passing through those 4 people, right? So all the surveys, all the simulations, all the data that's coming in passes through us, and after us there are 500 plus construction workers who are waiting for us. There is millions of budgets to be spent, and we are just building a network that will last more than 50 years. So no pressure. Yes, there is pressure, of course, but hey, we did it last year like that. But we will see that we will progress also, because it's we are accelerating our deployment, and this will have an impact as well on the team. Yeah, I was talking about acceleration because yeah, everything was going very well. It's going very well, and yeah, up to the time that our CEO, and you see his picture here, Guillaume Boutin, had the idea like, okay, fiber deployment, well, very well, but you need to go faster.
Here's the pressure, right? Here's the pressure.
Much faster. And by the way, do it cheaper as well. So, okay, still no pressure. How did we tackle this one with Comsof? How we are using to optimize the deployment cost, how we are using Comsof to optimize deployment cost. And the first parameter where we worked a lot on was the design rules. The design rules is one of the things that we are putting into Comsof and in the calculator to build our network. And the design rules are very important in the way that they are determining how your design, your network is going to look. But it's also very important in the sense that they are determining in a very important way the cost of your network as well. And we are very busy at optimizing our design rules. As you can see on the bar at the top, I think more or less every year we have a new iteration and newer design rules. And we do that thanks to our designs that we have done with the older design rules, that we analyze, that we look at, and how can we optimize, what can we do better. And we define new design rules, and we develop with Comsoft a new version or new versions. It's getting more and more complex also. We started with wall mount and underground, version 2, 2.1, 2, 2.1. We are now going to even combine two versions of underground together in the same fiber route, wall mount, underground version 2, underground version 3. We are going to combine that. There are, we already talking about doing pole mounts as well in the future. It's an evolution that continues. It doesn't stop. It's a continuous evolution and looking at current designs, analyzing and defining what can be better. We just don't do that for fun. We do that to optimize the cost because we see also that different regions benefit from different design rules. We see that very well. We started our deployment in the city centers. We are now going more to the suburbs, even more to rural areas now. We see that to drive the efficiency, the cost efficiency of your network deployment, that you need to adapt your design rules. On the other hand, we know as well, every year new design rules, always introducing new design rules, it can be a challenge as well. Right? For everybody who needs to work with it, it's always new. You have to learn and you have to adapt. And yeah, I think, and I think that Rav already said it once, we have, I think, one of the most complex sets of design rules within Proximus. But yeah, it's a benefit that you need to take. It's a choice that you need to make in order to be cost efficient. It's sometimes technically a little bit more complex, but it's still doable.
Well, and if I can just add on this part of the story here, I think one of the remarkable things and the part of the success of our collaboration, I think, is definitely also in the manner of cooperating and a very tight and close collaboration between the Comsof experts and the Proximus team, and making these iterations and adaptations work as fast as possible, implement them as fast as possible so they can be checked. So definitely they're subscribing to what Patrick was already mentioning, as we are really talking about partnering and working together in an ecosystem.
And thinking together as well. It's not always just working, but also thinking and about what can be better and how can we evolve to have still a better system. So the design rules is one thing to get more a better deployment cost, of lower deployment cost. Analyzing the deployment cost is also a possibility, and certainly something that we are doing, because what's very interesting in this schematic of what we are doing with Comsoft is the data. Now, we know the shapefiles, the designs, that's something that construction partner is wanting to have, but there is also a lot of data that can be used, and we are using on a continuously basis. We are doing calculations. We calculate unit cost, cost evolution, cost per network element, cost per region. Because all that data is centralized, it's very easy to do so. So we see how the cost is evolving, see what, for instance, if we have a certain net, if we want to make sure, I'll say it otherwise, if we want to take certain actions, for instance, we want to lower the price of a certain network element, with all the data at hand, we can identify which network element can be the most interesting to do an exercise to see what will be the effect if we lower the price of a certain network element. It's a continuously improvement. It's an exercise that continuously is ongoing. And as we were already previously saying, I think the whole notion of doing Comsoft calculations, it's something that is known a bit everywhere within the Proximus company. And it's a very, very valuable thing to have all that data and to use that data. I call it also a gold mine, to find cost optimizations and to find better ways to deploy our network. I saw something move on my screen. Okay, so cost is very important. cheaper. We have a lot of data that we can analyze, but we need to move faster as well. And not only this presentation, but also the fact that we need to deploy faster. I come back to this slide. And yeah, the mantra was like, okay, we need to double the speed ×2. So still no pressure, but we needed to get some help. And in order to strengthen our team, we got to Cuando, and Cuando is a Comsoft certified partner who's working in the Czech Republic. And we were at record time, I would say, as well. We were able to upstaff my team with members of the Cuando team in order to help us to get through that acceleration. I think we had the first idea to go to Cuando in, I think, last year, November. In January, we were operational. I think that's a huge success. If the tool is what we are doing with Comsoft is so crucial within the process of the fiber deployment that we are doing, it's nothing more than logical that we get also inside our company, inside Proximus, official IT support. We also set up a specific server environment. And also the way that we are working, Proximus and Comsoft together has been getting more and more professional over time. And just to give some ideas, if we are talking about the server, if we are doing calculations on the national run, it's more than 30 calculators that we are using. It's terabytes of storage, but it's a very powerful machine indeed. Taking it further, because Comsoft and everything that we've seen up till now is, I would say, the very traditional thing. It's a calculator that we are using to design a network and to have some data out of it. But we are more and more using the Comsoft data also out of this process. And we are exploring more new ways to use that data. We have data coming out of it. And in fact, yeah, we use it now to drive different things. The Comsoft data is also used to do contract awarding. The very early stage, what we call in the process stage 1. We can calculate a certain area or areas or cities with Comsoft. And that information is handed over to the partners who want to construct for us, so that they can get a very good idea what the new work could be. And if we are to contract awarding, having the information from Comsoft is a valuable input to give to future partners. The purchase or the process. So every time if you're going to deploy a city, parts of the city, purchase orders are issued to our partners. Then we are using the Comsoft data. It's not, again, another database that we are building or whatever. No, we take the data out of Comsoft. We want to construct these and these and these fiber routes, take the data from Comsoft, and as such, we are issuing the purchase orders. So it's a link, in fact, between price lists and Comsoft data. Another link is when you have your Comsoft data with all the data per fiber route, and you combine it with planning. So when you want to actually deploy in your fiber routes, you can make forecasts, capacity forecast towards your partners, if that they can, for instance, dimension their teams correctly, how many teams they need for trenching, how many teams they need to do wall mount and others. You can do material forecasting because you know what your quantities are in a fiber route, and when you know when you want to do a fiber route, you can do a forecast of material. And also, very importantly, the Comsoft data is also used to drive our financial planning. the same way, if you know when you want to deploy certain fiber routes, you know what to do in fiber routes in a certain in those fiber routes, you can make a very accurate financial planning. It doesn't stop here, of course. We do the design rules. They will be extended. We are still exploring new ways to do to extend those design rules. The input data, we are still looking at ways how we can enrich that data. Server is evolving, and the integration to other processes is something that will continue as well. Wow, bit of relax. After all that information, I've gone, I think, rather fast through everything, but I kept the timing, which is also important, I think, in order to have a bit time for Q&A. Some final thoughts and some final relaxing words. When I think about Comsoft, or when I think about Comsoft, I think basically about three things, and that are important for us, for our company. That's first of all, Comsoft is the best designs. It brings us the best designs, the most optimal designs, cost-efficient designs. The way that we are using Comsoft, and we are evolving and continue to evolve with Comsoft, is very fast. It's very agile. Testimonial is that we are changing design rules almost every year, and that we have multiple versions of Comsoft. And the third one is perhaps the lesser known thing about Comsoft, is that beneath all those designs, there is a very rich data environment that can be used to drive cost efficiency, that can drive planning, and that can drive also other processes outside the normal, I would say, the back process and the planning, engineering, construction process. Voila. I think I covered.
Yes.
I covered it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Geert, for taking us through all those different steps. And as you rightfully said, it's an evolutionary path. It's been an amazing journey over the past years, working together to get where we are now. And I think if I can have one takeaway from what you were saying that I found very powerful, it's that sentence when you showed and mentioned that the bill of material and the details and the knowledge you gain out of that's really a gold mine for the right decision making. It gives you the insights you need to make sure you're doing the right steps in the rollout, in the decision making afterwards. And I think that's a very nice accomplishment. Okay, so there's been like a dozen questions already coming in. So anyone else in the audience still wanting to ask a question, you can still leave it in the Q&A screen. We have some time to treat some of those. First of all, quite a practical one that came back a couple of times, whether the recording and the presentation will be available afterwards. And yes, that's the case. So anybody registered for the webinar will get access to the material. So that's an easy one. I'll leave the difficult ones to answer to the other people. So I'll pick up one here where there's a couple of questions actually coming back on the topic of street survey and site survey. Can you maybe explain briefly here what is also the difference between those two, and what is the most important update that comes out of these surveys? What's the biggest difference that those surveys bring in the input?
Basically, the difference between street survey and site survey is quite easy. Now, with the street survey, we just walk into the streets, and we call it a bit like we are counting the letterboxes. So we're doing an outside survey. We do not enter any building. So that's basically the street survey. What we get out of it is that we get a very accurate survey about the number of living units. And again, in some regions, it can be very little difference between the actual data that we have. In some regions, it can be quite substantial. It depends. But that's a street survey. It's an outside survey counting the letterboxes. With a site survey, we are going inside building, and that's mainly to do a survey on how we are going to construct, and we are talking not about single dwelling units, but we are talking about multi-dwelling units, so apartment buildings. That's mainly to have an idea how we are going to construct the infrastructure on the inside. But what is also important, and that's typically on the chaotic way we are building in Belgium, that even in a site survey, we can still identify some extra living units or some special things. And that's why we also add that to our chain of information that we process.
If I may add on the importance of the survey, we should not underestimate the importance of that step, right? Because it goes back to the importance of that input data that you were talking about. And the most accurate input data will provide you the most accurate design, right? We already talked about that. But sometimes, again, going back full circle to that dilemma that Raf, you were talking about, speed versus accuracy, which one should we choose? We've seen in the past in many cases where the site survey is a means to that data quality end, right, that you want, and people bypass that step just to get digging in the street as soon as possible. But we know how much loss can be because of that,
Yeah, we want to avoid surprises at the end. And that's why we are putting a lot of effort into all those surveys and those iterations, is just to have always a little bit better result and a little bit more accuracy. And it pays off, to be quite honest. Because the opposite is also true. A small number of bad data can have a very big impact on your end result.
Yeah. Well, and maybe jumping into that, there was also a question whether the Comsoft tooling or anything around that also does some automated data cleaning or data integrity checks. Is there any experiences you can share there?
That's something that we try to develop in-house, that we do indeed some checks. As I said also in the presentation, we also process our own data. And there indeed we do also some checks about data integrity. And we try also to make some tools in order to find, I would say, inconsistencies in data. Yeah, indeed we do.
And some questions here relate also to the fact that, of course, we've now talked a lot about the early stage high-level simulations, national run, and high-level design. But what after that with low-level design and the tooling in that part of the process?
If they are talking about low-level design or detailed design, that's something that is done at the partner side. So what we are basically producing or making is a high-level design, and that means that we have a design up to the level of the cable, and up to the level of the number of fibers in the cable, and that we know how many fibers are connected to the other cable. But the detailed design, which we are, when you're really going to design that the blue fiber in cable 7 is going to the red fiber on cable 29, that is done on the partner side, and that is done in the inventory system, in fact. And between those, there is no link.
Yeah, well, and I can comment maybe as well that we do have some construction partners of Proximus also using some Comsoft tooling for low-level design, but not all of them. As you leave them free, as you say, to use their own tools for construction, it's a choice of the partner what tools they want to use. Maybe for you, Kelly, an interesting question here that says, what size of network do you need? What makes sense to use automation tools like Comsoft? Is there a minimum size?
That's a very good question. Actually, of course, like any software, you need to have a training. There is a period that you need to dedicate to train your resources to use the software. So indeed, with automation, it goes without saying that the bigger your scope, the more valuable automation becomes, because it just covers that much more in scope. So I wouldn't put a tag on it necessarily. I would always say, if you do have an FTTH scope, contact us, let us know what your scope is, and there's always a way to discuss. I would say though, if you're starting out with a very small scope, one thing that is very interesting is talking about our design partners. We have design partners that are already fully fledged, capable of taking on those designs. And instead of maybe investing in that amount to bring in a new automation software, you can turn to a certified design partner where they can do those designs for you and really help you out. But in the end, I would encourage everyone to just contact us, and we can discuss on a case by case.
I think it also depends on the complexity of your design rules. If you can keep your design rules very standard or very simple, I think you can have very quickly benefit of automating it.
True. Yeah. And so unfortunately, your complexity of the rules has been very high with all these combinations. So you needed some size, but 2 million homes and even now 4 million homes is more than enough to get the benefits out of it for sure. So I see we've run through our time. We've also treated part of the questions, but we can also take some other questions directly with the people asking them. So I think we can wrap it up for now. I'd like to thank all our speakers and all our attendees for your attention. And I hope it was useful and that you learned something out of it. And for the rest, I hope to see many of you hopefully soon again physically at some fiber event across the world, rather than too many webinars in the future. But for now, take care and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.